Sparklers, welcome back to another episode of Ignite Your Spark. I'm your host, Kim Duff Selby. I don't know why I say that every time, but I do because if you're listening to it, you know that. If you're watching it, you see me. I am thrilled once again to bring you a fabulous guest because all my guests are fabulous and they are all here to ignite your spark. Now, the podcast is not about me, although I gather so much from each guest. It's about you and helping you ignite your spark so that you can be the best version of yourself and live your life to the fullest, to your shiniest self, because all of us like to be around shiny, sparkly, fun people. Okay. Yes, I know that's a little simplistic. However, welcome to my podcast, Lisa Tahir. And Lisa is a licensed clinical social worker. And I love the name of her business. It's NOLA. So she works in New Orleans and Los Angeles, but that also we know means New Orleans, Louisiana. So very cute, Lisa. I love that. She is an author as well. Her book is called The Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness. I love this because she utilizes all of her education in the traditional sense, along with her education in the spiritual sense. And she does something called psychoastrology, and we're going to find out about that. She also has a podcast, which I really enjoy, called All Things Therapy. Really good. And I just want to say this too, Lisa. She has a nonprofit called the Yes Foundation that teaches children and adults with disabilities to blow and cast glass art using her ADA compliant and US patented workbench, the chair-EOT. So one of the things she likes to do is glass art too. She's very multi-talented and faceted. And thank you for joining me, Lisa.
Kim, I'm so delighted to be here with you and our audience. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Now, how do you, Lisa, ignite your spark?
You know, I've been thinking of that today because I've been listening to your podcast, and I intended for this to be a day where I got to do my favorite way of igniting my spark earlier in the day, which is going for a workout. I see working out as play. I just ask my body, how do you want to play today, and let myself do it. But some things came up. I have not been able to do that. And I've honestly felt quite a bit of anxiety today and some stress. And I'm sharing this because I know people listening and watching, this is life, that we have a plan and sometimes things come up and we're not able to do our self-care practices in maybe the order or way that is most desirable. And that's where I sit with you, like right now in the moment, in real time. So actually, this time with you is actually igniting my spark, just being in your energy, which is so bright and buoyant, and allowing this conversation to emerge. So I'm feeling like I'm coming to a place of centeredness and grounding as we're beginning the show together. And I thank you for that. So this is how my spark is being ignited today, is right now with you.
Thank you. That really means a lot. And I do find that my spark gets ignited absolutely when I'm interviewing people, because it takes the focus off of me. You know, when we are so in ourselves and we're like, poor me, this me, this me. And when you have to put your focus on, not have to, but choose to put your focus on someone or something else, like working out or meditating, then you are able to become more grounded. And so your answer was very special to me. Thank you. Thank you for
You're
that.
so
I appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're so welcome. And even I did meditate this morning. That's a daily practice I have, but there were some things on my list that came up a bit to my surprise. And I noticed I've had to really hold myself in as much alignment as I can. And what I mean by that is knowing things are always working out for me. It's a mantra I learned from Abraham Hicks that I embrace and offer to anyone today that might be having a day pulling their emotions in different places, but know, regardless of what it looks like in any given moment, things are working out for us. And life wants us to embrace and believe that.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's something we all need to hear and utilize in our daily lives. I have to say that you are basically the therapist of my dreams.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean that. I have only been to traditional therapy for a short time in my 20s after my father passed away. I had lost both my mother and father, found out I was
Hmm.
adopted, and the world was
Wow.
spinning. And she was lovely. She was a counselor. And although I have been in the spiritual arena my entire life, I did not know there was such a thing. And I don't think there were many 30 years ago. People
Yeah.
who combined the modalities of traditional therapy along with, shall we say, more spiritual practices as well.
Hmm.
And that's why I think, not knowing you as a therapist, only having listened to your podcast and reading about you and reading a little portion of the book, that you are the ideal candidate for people who want a traditional therapy session along with a little bit of, dare I say it, woo thrown in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Have you always been on the spiritual path?
You know, Kim, when I became a therapist, I see my diploma right here. I was licensed in 2000. And so it's been 24 years. And I always was a different kind of therapist. Like, I loved my training in social work. I love the different theories and paradigms that have been around for ages. Yet I always felt like therapy, it's about the person in front of me, and everyone's different, and really seeking to align my own energy with wanting to understand the person in front of me and what their deepest needs are emotionally and how to meet them in that space. So, though I didn't know I was being spiritual or taking into account the whole person, I think I have been. And in recent years, by choice, having the language and terminology, but I've always sought to just really connect with who's with me so they leave feeling like they were seen and heard, because I know that's what's actually healing.
Absolutely. You don't want to go into therapy. It's like you don't want to go to a doctor that's cookie cutter and
Right.
just says the same answers, or physical therapy. I remember I had a back issue, my daughter had a knee issue, and we were given the same exercise. And I do understand that our body parts are all aligned in that regards, but I feel like sometimes in more traditional modalities, the whole person is not seen. And I love that you
Right.
do that.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, oh, I mean, I think it's such a gift to your clients. Now, do people come to you not realizing that there is that portion of you,
They
or do
do.
people mostly, yeah, they do, don't they? Huh?
No, they do. And so that's interesting because I just had a new client before we met just now for our conversation. And I try to kind of weave in because I like to start where someone is, like what brought you in and what's the presenting issue that had you make this session an appointment. And I'll kind of weave in over time different ways of looking at their issue, looking at their problem to help them align with the solution. And as I feel led to offer, hey, I did write this book on healing through self-forgiveness and empathy and this astrological placement of Chiron. Are you interested in knowing more? And just, or just trying to indirectly weave in different, asking even what do you believe spiritually? If it's around grief or loss, I think asking about spirituality is so important. Like, what do you believe about the afterlife? Or do you? And where do you believe your deceased loved ones are? So I try to work it in as it feels appropriate for the person.
Mm, that is so special. Really, I think that's something that hopefully more and more licensed therapists, doctors are taking into consideration when dealing with the human soul in front of them. You also practice Reiki, though, too.
I do. I'm a Reiki practitioner. So I have some clients that come in and will do half the session Reiki. And then the last portion will come and sit down and talk about it. Like, hey, what did you experience? And I'll share what I noticed, what came up for me. And so I like combining the sessions being half and half because it elicits different things.
Mhm, mhm. So you became a licensed therapist in 2000, and when did you start on your Reiki journey or on your astro how do I say it?
Psychoastrology.
Psychoastrology journey?
All that, Kim, kind of happened in conscious time in my awareness around 2016 when I went out to Los Angeles and really fell in love with the city. I was born and raised in New Orleans, where I am today, and I just felt like there's so much here. I found it so exciting, never having lived anywhere else. And I really dug into, oh my gosh, what is Reiki, and going to different meditations and sound healings and things about quantum physics, and just really it really suited me because I realized I had always been working at these levels but didn't have the language for it to use crystals and use. I've always been into kind of rituals like lighting candles and writing intentions for the new year rather than resolutions, and learning how there are people that do this, and I can go study and learn more about it. So that's where it became more conscious and kind of activated in my life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Of course, we are so groovy in California. I'm in Northern California, but
Are
we're
you?
still
Oh my
very
gosh.
groovy here
Okay.
too. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes. Ha.
Yeah, no, it makes sense that it all came to you at that point in time, because that seems to be the point in time when more and more people were accessing or have been accessing their gifts. I have seen an explosion of spiritual practices even over the past 4 years since I started my podcast. And it's
Okay.
because we're stepping into the light. And what you
Yes.
do, Lisa, is so vital because we all need healing. And you
Yes.
talk
Thank you.
about in your book the core wounds. What exactly are our core wounds? I know it's different for everyone, but if you could just, maybe explain that.
Absolutely. So, core wounding, it's actually on a spectrum. It's just too many words to put in a title. That for some of you listening or watching, you have areas of vulnerability. It's more of like an ouch. And you have value, you have worth, you believe in yourself, you got those beautiful and loving messages, maybe that you can do anything, that I'm always here for you. So your self-esteem is really intact, and when something happens, it's more of like an ouch or a speed bump versus moving up and along that spectrum. Core wounding are these deeper emotional wounds where there's been trauma, there's been abuse, there's been abandonment, and we start to make meanings about ourselves like we're not worthy, we're not important, we're not valuable. And in my experience, I lived a lot of my life as a younger person like that, not valuing myself and not really knowing it, just feeling depressed and sad and not really knowing why, and encountering relationships and experiences where I might be taken advantage of, or I might inadvertently abandon myself and something happens. And as I
Hmm.
started to heal and grow, this, really learning that to not learning to not self-abandon, to really self-love. And we hear a lot about boundaries, usually in
Hmm.
the terms of setting boundaries with others. And for me, I think it's a lot about how you set boundaries with yourself, or you release boundaries from yourself, that maybe you need to give yourself permission to have more fun, to work less and play more. And that was the case for me, and still is at times. Like, how can I have more fun and freedom while doing what I love and not be so stringent with myself and regulated? Is that resonating?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And these core wounds, I am imagining, can come from this lifetime or perhaps past lifetimes if people believe that, or they can even be subconscious. Like, and I feel like I'm always repeating myself on this, but I was adopted, but I found that out when I was 22. So
Okay.
I think that I have that core wound, the whole mother wound thing, that I didn't
Yeah.
realize, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
something that happened to me, for me, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't always realize that we have core wounds, or that those core wounds are what are influencing our day-to-day life. Were you able to determine what your core wounds came from?
I that really became clear to me when I started writing my book, and I received the download, so to speak, about my book when I was asking the universe, really frustrated, like why I work with a lot of very successful people, and why are my clients who are so intelligent and aware and self-responsible, why are they experiencing anxiety and depression, and why am I? And I started to hear this word Chiron, and Kim, it wasn't very meaningful to me, in all honesty. I was kind of like, what? Chiron. But you know, when something wants you to receive it, it kind of starts showing up everywhere. And
Yes.
finally, after a few weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, let me just research this Chiron shit, and see what comes up. And, I learned Chiron. I remembered from grad school, Carl Jung wrote about Chiron as the archetype of the wounded healer, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't in Chiron's also in astronomy, a minor planet and
Mhm.
comet designated in astronomy. It has an elliptical orbit between the planets of Saturn and Uranus, astronomically. I thought that was pretty cool, and was named after Chiron, the centaur, and Greek mythology of the healing arts. I thought, okay, I love that kind of stuff. It's interesting, but how is this the answer to my question? And when I delved further, finding Chiron is a placement in your astrological birth chart, like your sun sign. Like, what's your sign, Kim?
Libra, Libra.
You're a Libra. Okay, and I'm a Gemini. So Chiron is in one of these 12 signs: Gemini, Libra, Scorpio, etc. And it's different from your sun sign. And when I started to research that, I discovered that where Chiron is in your chart identifies one of these 12 placements of vulnerability, up to including core wounding if you experienced abuse, trauma, something like that. And it's where we source our not feeling good enough. And it's like, as far as we let ourselves go in life, we can only go as far as our largest limiting belief allows us to. And that was a real aha. And I struggled with the astrology piece too, Kim. Like, universe, are you telling me something prescribed to me is dictating, my life experience? And I had
Yeah.
the biggest download ever of like, Lisa, hell no, you wrote your chart. Like, we wrote our own chart. Nobody gave it to us. We scripted this and crafted it as we have our life experience before we came into this physical body that we have such awareness of. And while we probably don't remember scripting out this chart, this life, we have free will and personal responsibility to change things for ourselves. And I believe that's through the thoughts that we think, which support the beliefs that we have. And when we can really change our thoughts to be more loving, self forgiving, and empathetic, we create beliefs that are the vehicle to take us to where we really want to go in our lives. And that's what my book is about in a nutshell.
Okay, I love that. I love that. That was my question also, was what is Chiron? And you did answer that. And let's see, when I wrote this down, so it's you use the placement of where Chiron was in our birth chart to identify the core wounds,
Yeah, should
right?
I share some examples of that so it becomes
Yeah,
more
if you
tangible?
would, I think thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So in my chart, Chiron is in the sign of Aries, and that speaks to a vulnerability or core wounding in my personal sense of my own value and worth. And these are patterns for others of you with Chiron and Aries, where you've sourced love. You learn to source love through people pleasing, through a lot of hard work, through really giving your all, going above and beyond, and hiding when you might be in discomfort or overwhelmed, so people don't know you need relief or help, and you tend to burn out and experience. That's where the anxiety and depression comes from. You're overperforming, and to source value and worth in things and being a good person and things that you really do care about. It's real, it's authentic, but you go too far with it. And when I realized that, it was such an aha that that's 100% true. And how can I source value intrinsically instead of extrinsically? Like, that I'm generous, that I'm kind, that I'm good enough. If I never do another thing, I'm just good enough, period, as I am. And to kind of let myself off the hook of super high performance all the time. And
Mhm.
so it's learning to show up differently. And I give 5 or 6 takeaway steps for every placement. Chiron in the sign of Cancer would be core wounding by abandonment, where you experience an abandonment, either literally like a caretaker leaving, or maybe they had an addiction that was their primary relationship, and you were left to fend for yourself, and you might even be abandoning yourself in some ways. So I'll just pause to see how that
Yeah,
lands.
really fascinating.
Yeah.
And in your book, do you help us figure out where Chiron was, or is that something we would have to go see you
No, there's
for?
in my book, there's actually a chart in the book, like where you can look up your when you're born, and I have an interactive website at nolatherapy.com/Chiron. If you go there, you can just enter your birth data and it generates Chiron and blank for you.
Oh, very cool. So
Yeah,
that we have that and we know when we read the book what what
what
our core
applies to you.
wounds are.
Or vulnerability. Again, for some people, it might not everyone, thank goodness, experiences trauma. So for some of you, it might be an ouch moment where it's just a little stumbling block. Yet I think it helps to know our areas of vulnerability, because those are the things we tend to hide about ourselves.
Mhm.
And when we hide who we are, I don't believe we're actually as happy as we can be. So it's really giving each other permission to be more authentic, where you're safe to do so, where you're welcomed to do so. And while it might not be with every person in every area of your life. Hopefully, you can create that, if you don't have it, with even one person, that you can let your guard down and really be authentic about things that are going on for you.
Mm. I've also read that, I mean, I don't feel like I experienced true trauma in the sense of how so many people who were abused or lived in um, substance abuse homes, but don't we all experience a trauma being born into the world because it's traumatic leaving the birth canal? Or,
Sure.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I know.
everybody has something.
Right. I mean, I've definitely read that for sure, but I think it's about what you do remember. There's plenty enough that we do remember to work with. So I say just work with that instead of reaching for things you don't know, because I think that kind of throws you off your track. And trust your own guidance and intuition. And my book is like it's a self-help journal. There are journal prompts where I have you write about memories of when you felt really loved and seen, and other times, conversely, when you didn't. And then what meaning did you make about yourself? Because that's really informing what you believe is true for you and what you believe you deserve from others and from life. So I want to help us kind of excavate and look at those meanings we've made about ourselves, and change the ones that are devaluing and cause us emotional pain.
Okay, this is a big question. How do we
Yeah.
change those? Is it through affirmations? Is it a many step process?
Well, it depends on what the issue actually is. So again, for each kind of vulnerability and wounding, I'll offer some things that might be helpful. But there's a section I sourced from Dr. Judith Herman. She's a trauma expert and was a mentor from afar in my education on healing through sexual trauma, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and neglect, where it's really about what's truly fractured in those experiences is your sense of the world being a safe place for you.
Mhm.
And it's like a continual hypervigilance around, am I safe? And that can come from either even smaller things that happen in our lives. So don't minimize whatever you experience that's left you feeling some emotional instability. It's valuable, and it's learning how to trust ourselves, feel like we have security and safety in our own body, like being safe physically, first tier, and then safe emotionally. And I do recommend therapy for those that have experienced the deeper wounding, because it helps to have somebody to kind of lead you through that territory.
Absolutely. And to have someone who's a sounding board, who's not your best friend, who is someone who can look at it objectively and not uh, place what they know about you upon you. And surely through
Right.
therapy, you get to know someone, certainly, but it's a different relationship. And I've come to believe that we could all use therapy. I don't care if you
Yeah.
don't think you had trauma, you know, because I never thought I had trauma. And then when I looked back after all the interviews I've done with trauma coaches and shadow work
Yeah.
people, I'm like, holy moly, I have, not the kind that really that some people go through, as I've said before. And that's why I believe everybody could benefit from learning about their core wounds through psychoastrology. Is that what psychoastrology, what is that before we
Psychos,
wrap up?
I love I love language and words. I think they're just fun. And so psychoastrology is simply where your astrological birth chart meets your personal astrology. Just very simple. That intersection between our current functioning psychologically and emotionally with the birth chart that I believe we wrote, and how we want to use that in our lives. And for me, it's Chiron. I'm not a trained astrologer. I'm a trained psychotherapist. So for me, I use astrology as the diagnostic point to understand where Chiron is, so you can understand the deeper psychological issues at play, and maybe why you have some of the beliefs you do about yourself, and how far you can go in your life, or how not far you can go in your life, and to change your self-talk. Like, we are constantly communicating. We think up to 70,000 thoughts a day. It's
Mhm.
astronomical, the amount. And if we can just grab a few of those that make us feel bad, and kind of wrestle with it a bit, and say even out loud at first, I don't want to believe this anymore about myself, that I'm unworthy, that I'm not good enough, that I can't have this, or I can't do this. I want to believe in myself more. And what are the how do we have to start showing up differently in our lives to get there? Because I think it requires us showing up differently than maybe we have before.
Mhm. And we have such conditioning, so many limiting beliefs put upon us, whether it's by parents or teachers or friends. Oh, you're to this, you're to that. And I know that just lands in our head. And it's part of those thoughts. When I know that is 70,000 thoughts, I'm like, no, no, I have 90,000 thoughts going in my head every day.
Yes,
Trust me
Kim.
on this.
Yeah, and we can push against those thoughts. Like, no, I'm not too much. And again, you don't have to go telling everyone off to do this. This is an inside job. And that's
Mhm.
why meditation is so effective, to really, for a few minutes every day, meditate upon, you as unconditionally loved, unconditionally just right where you're actually meant to be on the way to everything you want, and allowing that feeling in your body to soothe the sense of, I thought I'd be somewhere else by now. I hear that a lot. And I've thought that a lot. And instead of realizing, no, this is actually the perfect place. And how can I get excited about what's coming and look more forward instead of back? Because everything we want is actually ahead of us, not behind us. And to try to train ourselves like a horse with the blinders on, like really train our minds to look ahead, to really start to become excited about what's on the way because of what we're
Mm.
doing today.
Lisa, it's funny that you said that because I have always been that person who, like back in my 20s, when someone would break up with me, because it did happen, I did my fair share of breaking up, but I would, instead of wallowing, I would say, I somehow had the wherewithal to go, ooh, now what? Now I get to meet
Wow,
someone else. I fortunately
that's
was brought up
awesome.
that I was brought up in a very positive, household, even though they didn't tell me I was adopted, but hey, we all
Yeah.
have issues. Uh, Lisa, I know we need to wrap up, but I just want to say the name of your book again, The Chiron Effect: Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self Forgiveness. And I do think that journal prompting that you were speaking about is key to this, and meditation. And if you're like me and have 90,000 thoughts a day and think, I don't have time to meditate, you need to meditate more. I need
Yes.
not just the morning and the evening. I need little breaks throughout the day because that is what helps me. And I know it will help other people. Anything else you would like to end with? I'm loving this conversation. I could talk to you forever,
Me too.
but
Just Kim, I want to have you on my podcast. Would you be my guest on All Things Therapy? I do want to talk to you more
oh,
about things and more of your
I would.
experience.
Oh, yeah, I would love to. I would
Okay, then we're
love
going to do
to.
that. We're going to
Okay,
do it.
that sounds awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything, Lisa, because you've shared so much wisdom. I really appreciate all the little tips
Thank
you've
you.
given us. Thank you.
The one thing to leave people with, and I shared this when one of my bucket list dreams was to lecture at Columbia University, and it happened twice. And it was about my book in the Mind Body Spirit Masters program. And what came to me to share, and I've never forgotten it, is to really think about, and if you can close your eyes now or later, to just really start to, in your heart space, allow the belief to grow that I'm the most important person in the universe, and so is the person next to me.
Mm.
And I think when we really have that experience of just how important we are as well as the person next to me. Like our world can really start to become a better place in our personal environments.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
oh my gosh, my listeners, you are so lucky today. You got some great tips. And what Lisa just shared reminds me of how I like to connect with people, which is my heart spark to your heart spark, to all of you out there, because you are important. You are a light. I am a light, but you have to say it. You have to say it enough times so that you really believe it, because everyone has a light inside. And when we share that light, we make the world a better place, and we give others permission to share their light. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed interviewing Lisa. Please, please subscribe, rate, leave a comment, because I want to share more light. Again, not about me, about you and all those that we can affect and bring their light out. Thank you for shining. And remember, the person next to you is just as important. Acknowledge their light as well. Shine on.